Welcome everyone. Today's presentation is sponsored by CALMA, the Center for Advances in Libraries, Museums, and Archives at the University of Washington iSchool. We have a full slate of programming coming up over the rest of the academic quarter. So please check out the event listings on our website to see what we have planned through the end of May. I think we have 5 events just in May. So yeah, lots of stuff coming up. Just a quick logistical note that we will be holding some time at the end for questions, but you're welcome to put any questions you might have in the chat throughout the presentation. We do plan to record and post the Q&A session. So if you'd like to ask a question but remain anonymous, please feel free to put it in the chat or message it to me directly and I can read it out. So the reason we are here today. We are very excited to be joined by Casper Hvenegaard Rasmussen, an associate professor at the Department of Communication at the University of Copenhagen. Dr. Rasmussen's research interest is in library studies and cultural policy studies. And today he will be sharing some of his latest work, How Can LAMs Support Democracy? And with that, I will hand it over to Casper.
Okay, thank you. And you can see the slides right now, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the invitation. My name is Casper, and I'm from University of Copenhagen, where I've been for many years. And what I will do the approximately next 50 minutes is to tell you about the LAMs and how they can support democracy. And as a kind of a teaser, I will give you one example from US, and I will do that because on one hand, democracy is a good thing and everybody agrees that we should have a little more democracy. But on the other hand, democracy is too a kind of ideological battlefield. And I have tried to find 2 examples here. On one hand, you can say that for the last months in Denmark, we have not discussed Danish politics so much because all the discussions go about the Trump administration and what they're going to do right now. And there have been one discussion about that the Trump administration are attacking democracy because they are attacking the free research, the free press, the legal system, and so on. And when you're talking about that, you're talking about that democracy is related to certain rights and certain institutions. On the other hand, maybe it was a couple of months ago, your Vice President J.D. Vance, he traveled to Munich to the NATO summit. And for us Europeans, he really rocked the boat. And he was saying that the threat for Europe was not a threat from Russia or Putin, but it was a kind of threat inside Europe. It was a threat because, especially in Germany, the moderate parties, they would not listen to a big group of people who have been voting for AfD or Alternative for Deutschland, a right-wing party. And somehow Vance was right, because you can also understand democracy as you have to listen to the will of the people. That was what the Swiss philosopher Rousseau were writing about in the social contract. So here you can see there can be a kind of tension between seeing democracy on one hand as rights, and on the other hand as the will of the people. And these two perspectives, they can be conflicting. As a start, I will say a little bit about myself. I have been teaching and researching for nearly 30 years, and my main topic for research have been public libraries, and among many other things, I have developed the four-space model together with two other colleagues. And recently, I have been editing a book about libraries, museums, and archives. And furthermore, I am also interested in cultural policy and cultural mediation slash communication. And I will say that for many years, on a nearly daily basis, I have been reading about how important the cultural field is for democracy. Here you can see a tweet from the Danish Minister of Culture when he was appointed, and in Danish he is saying, "Oh, I really look forward to this job, because culture is the foundation for democracy." And the same thing you can read in several books. This is also a Danish book. So in that way, you can say that it is so taken for granted that culture is a support to democracy, and in a way, democracy is hiding in the light, because we don't have to explain how culture is supporting democracy. And therefore, I have decided that I will try to dig into this topic on democracy. And what I will do here today is that, first of all, I will say a bit about democracy in itself in general, and then I will try to present a model I have developed together with another colleague from Norway, Håkon Larsen. And this model, or the article we have wrote about this model, it is in review right now in Library Quarterly, and last week we were sending a revised version. So I hope in a couple of months it will be possible for you, if you want to read this article. And here we have a distinction that democracy primarily can be supported in four different ways. We can see democracy as rights, where the lands give access to content. Secondly, we can talk about LAMP supporting democracy by supporting citizenship, where the LAMPs educate people to be good, active citizens. And as a third thing, the LAMPs can be not only giving access, but they can also be an arena where a public discussion can go on. And finally, you can say that democracy means that the people rules. So democracy in a LAM perspective can also be to hand over some powers to the citizens or the users. And as you can see on this model, everything looks really in order. But in reality, things maybe more look like this because, as I said, both in general, but also when it comes to LAMPs and other cultural institutions, democracy is also a kind of ideological battlefields with a lot of conflicts popping up all the time, and I will try to also show you some of these different kinds of conflicts. So if we look at the concept democracy, it is a concept that have a really long story. It can be dating back to the Greek city-states going 2,500 years back. And democracy was that people was ruling. It was different from a monarchy where the king is ruling or a kind of aristocracy where a few people were the ruling. But in a democracy, it was the people who were who were ruling, and they were doing it in turns. So people could have different public functions. They could have a legal function or any other kinds of functions, and they have it in turns. Today, we would call that kind of democracy a direct democracy where people are participating in ruling. You must also say that the demos at that time was rather restricted because the people who could participate were only men. They should be over 30 years. They should be wealthy, and they should be born in the city. Um, so maybe it was only 20% of the citizens who could participate. Um, if we look at democracy today, you can say that democracy is quite different because democracy today is not about that we all participate, but it is about that we elect our leaders. And we do that because people today don't have slaves. They have to go to work and so on. So it is rather impractical if we all should participate all the time. You can also say that this liberal democracy, if you go to the democracy literature, this liberal democracy can be defined by consisting of two elements. First of all, in a liberal democracy, there's a kind of legal dimension where countries normally have a constitution and they have the principle of rule of law that everybody should be in a legal way treated the same way. And on the other hand, a liberal democracy also consists of a political democracy where people are electing the leaders. And among uh, scholars dealing with democracy, there's have been a lot of discussion about uh, about what should the minimum conditions be for talking about democracy. And here there's a great agreement about that there should be voting rights for a majority of the citizens. There should be ongoing elections. And one of the smart things when it comes to democracy is that we also can get rid of our leaders in a peaceful way. And furthermore, you have something to choose among, and what is extremely important in when it comes to libraries, people in a democracy should also have access to alternative information. So that is traditionally one of the main reasons for the public funding to especially public libraries. If we look at the concept democracy, because it has such a long history, um, you can also say that because of that, there have been many different meanings that have been connected to democracy, and sometimes these meanings can also all be conflicting with each other. And already 70 years ago, this Scottish philosopher Galley, he wrote a famous article when it comes to democracy, discussing essentially contested concepts. And he's saying that of contested concepts, democracy is probably the most controversial concept. It is more open to discussion than other debated concepts such as art or a good Christian. So what he is saying is that democracy cannot be anything. It cannot be monarchy or aristocracy, but there can be many different takes on what democracy is, in the same way as there can be a lot of takes on art or what will it say to be a good Christian. So it is a highly contested concept. However, if you look um, at democracy in reality, I will say that there are mainly two basic ways that people understand democracy. On one hand, many people understand democracy as a form of government, and on the other hand, democracy can also be seen as a kind a way of life or something like that. That democracy is not only something we're doing every fourth year when we go and elect our leaders. It is also something that we are doing every day. And as you can see in this cartoon or picture from a Danish newspaper, as individuals, we are also socialized or fed up with democracy. And if I should give a kind of Danish example, uh, in the time right after the Second World War in Denmark, there was a kind of intense debate on democracy. And they were discussing two things at that time. The first thing was, how should a democracy react to non-democratic movements like Nazis and so on? Should they be allowed or should they not? That was one discussion. The other discussion was actually, what is democracy? And two of the most famous participants in this discussions was the first one was a legal scholar called Alf Ross, who wrote this book, Why Democracy? And for Ross, democracy was only about that people should, the only role citizens should have in a democracy should be to elect their leaders. If you look at a more global level, you can say it is the same argument that the Austrian economist Schumpeter had in his famous book on capitalism, socialism, and democracy. Here, democracy is about that majority rules and that citizens should only elect their leaders and they should do nothing else. But for another scholar in Denmark, Hal Koch, who was a priest, it was really urgent that people were not only electing their leaders, but that there also were a kind of democratic citizenship, and that people should learn to be good Democrats. And the reason why that was so important for Hal Koch was that you have seen what happened in Germany in the Weimar Republic, where a majority elected Adolf Hitler. So if we should not do that again, we had to have a kind of democratic education, and that democracy is something that is going on every day, and that people should learn about that in the same way as John Dewey over in US have been arguing in pretty much the same way. So you can also say that for some, democracy is only a form of government, and for other, democracy is also coming more towards a kind of ideology, as this Danish scholar Mogens Hermann Hansen have said in a book. This book is in Danish, but if you should only read one book about democracy, you should write the book he is thinking about. It is written by a British political scientist, David Held, and it is entitled Models of Democracy. And if you are perceiving democracy not only as a form of government, but also somehow as a kind of ideology, a natural question will also be, what are the values that this ideology is based on? And I think if you ask some liberals, democracy is only a neutral form of government, but for other liberals, freedom will be the central value. If you ask more left-wing people, maybe equality will be more important. And if we say really roughly, if you ask conservative people, what is important, they will maybe say brotherhood. And here you have the French famous words from the French Revolution: freedom, equality, and brotherhood. And again, other people would maybe say that the important thing in democracy is that people should be tolerant, or it should be pluralism, or the common goal. It was just to show you some of the values that have been discussed. So now I will take a round in this model for the rest of the time, and I will start in the upper left corner where democracy can be seen as rights, where the lambs give access to different kinds of content. Here you can see the front page of a Danish book that was published some years ago. This book was marking that in Denmark we have had a Ministry of Culture for 60 years. And as you can see here, the book is about that the cultural policy have been about highbrow culture and giving access to highbrow culture, and also try to later on support a greater diversity of cultures. In cultural policy studies, it is very normal to talk about two main strategies. And the first one is the democratization of culture. And the democratization of culture, it is about giving access to highbrow culture. And secondly, the cultural democracy, it is about a cultural policy that also emphasize that we have different kinds of culture that is supported. So diversity is the important thing here. So you can also say that these two strategies, there are also two different takes on democracy in a cultural perspective. In the first one, democratization of culture, democracy is seen as access to highbrow culture. And in the next one, cultural democracy, democracy is seen as diversity. You can also say that basically this discussion is also about equal access. And you can also say that equal access can be contested, because how do we understand equal access? Do we understand equal access as rights, that everybody have rights to come to LAM institutions? But you can also understand equality as not only rights, but also possibilities, that it is not enough that people have rights, they should also have possibilities. And if we look at the Danish cultural policy, it is built on this principle that people should have equal possibilities, and there have been a lot of special services for different kinds of people who don't have the same possibilities as other people. And you can say that in general, the Nordic welfare states, they are built on this principle of equity, where it is all about that we should try to redistribute resources. And finally, today, also, if you look at the library field, there's a strong discussion about more radical ways of understanding social justice, where it is not enough just to redistribute resources, but it also deals with how you can try to fight different kinds of systemic barriers within society. It could be racism or things like that. And you can also, by this model, see, I know that you have a very heated debate in US about intellectual freedom versus social justice. It is also a discussion that is related to this model. So what we can see here is that everybody within the LAM field agrees that um, access to books, to documents, or to objects, it is a very good thing. But when we start to discuss what we should give access to, conflicts can arise, and who should decide what content there should be, and how far should we go in terms of creating equal access? Should we focus on rights, on opportunities, or a more radical form of social justice? So that was democracy as rights. Then there's the question about democracy as citizenship. And here I think there are basically two ways that this can be supported. Traditionally, it have been about trying to create a kind of autonomous individual on one hand, and on the other hand, you can also see that the GLAM institutions have been part of a kind of democratic education. You can say that information literacy is an example of that. If we are talking about the autonomous individual, one can say that in Europe, the situation historically were that before we had democracy, we were living in a feudal society, or and what was the important thing there was that servants and peasants, they have to obey their master. That was a kind of ideal. But if you're living in a kind of democracy, it is not only about that you should serve your master, because the people themselves are the master. So they should also be a kind of autonomous individual. And Rousseau was, in his famous book, The Social Contracts, as a start saying that man was born free, and he is everywhere in change. So the modern project was to try to transform people from being in change, or being servants or peasants who obey their master, to becoming these autonomous individuals. And here's another rather often used quotation. It is from the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, who was trying to ask the question, what is enlightenment. And you can say that what is characterizing the democratic people is, as Kant say, it is that one could use one's understanding without the guardians from any other persons. That's the autonomous individual. And for Kant, there was a kind of interplay between enlightenment and reason in that way that if you are enlightened, you also become more reasonable, and you should use your reason when you are enlightened. So enlightenment was very important, and you can also say that um, the cultural policies in the Western world have been built on assumptions like this. You can also see it here from this Danish priest, Halkok, was writing for a more deliberative approach to democracy right after World War II. Here he is saying also that it is not only enough that we have a kind of democratic system, we also have to educate people to be good Democrats. He talks about to shape, form, and educate them. And cultural institutions have here been playing a vital part. You can say that the big problem about citizenship or democratic literacy, or whatever you want to call it, is that it rather easy become a kind of paternalistic, and there's a kind of paradox in that you want to create independent people, and you're doing that in a paternalistic way. That is one of historically one of the big paradoxes for nearly any cultural institutions, including the LAMs, especially libraries and museums. If you should give some examples, more practical, on democratic literacy, it could be about, as I said, information literacy, or it could, one other example could be the Danish Library Association, which today are talking about that one of the tasks for public libraries, it is to try to give their users a kind of disagreement skills. And in the same way, you can say that also museums and archives in Denmark, they have a lot of projects going on, especially for young people, where they try to teach them different kinds of deliberative skills. And that's a question that have been raised because of hate speech and digital media and fake news and all that stuff. So what I also have been trying to saying here is that when you're talking about democracy as citizenships, there's a big chance that you can be a little paternalistic when you try to transform people to these autonomous individuals. And furthermore, there can also be rather heated debates about what will it say to be a democratic human being. Is it a human being who are looking also at the common good, or is it a kind of people that pursue their own happiness? and how should the balance be? And finally, if you also see that there are some different kinds of values within democracy, there can be a lot of struggle about what should these uh, values be. And then we have the third cycle, where we are talking about democracy as a public sphere. And here, uh, uh, the lambs are not only a part of the public sphere by giving access to information, but they are also a part of the public sphere by themselves as being uh, kinds of arenas for this public sphere. This is, of course, heavily inspired by the German philosopher and sociologist Jürgen Habermas and his writings on the public sphere. And if you look at libraries in Norway, in the Nordic countries, and also in Finland, they have in their legal public library acts that the libraries should be a part of the public sphere. Then we have the question about what is the public sphere and what kinds of dialogues or discussions can go on. And here you can say that normally people are focusing on a kind of political public sphere where different kinds of political issues is being discussed. But on the other hand, you can also talk about, I think, and that's important when we're talking about the lambs, a more broad cultural public sphere where we are not necessarily talking about politics, but we are talking about different kinds of issues that can be of a general importance for many people. Maybe we're discussing what will it say to be a good father, to be a good wife, or how should we react to our old parents, or whatever. It is also a discussion that is relevant in a public sphere. And I will give you two short examples, I think, of this. The first example is from the Workers' Museum in Copenhagen. And as you can see, they have some talks and some discussions. It is written in Danish, but as you can see here, they have a talk with a group called A Seat at the Table, where the title of this discussion and talk is How Can We Make Space for More Voices in Democracy? And this is I think a clear example of a kind of political public sphere. But if you look at the broader cultural public sphere, I think that literature circles within libraries or book clubs are a very good example here, because when people have read a book and discuss the content, they also discuss some of these broad questions. What will it say to be that or this, and so on. So I also think that libraries, they are also a public sphere or a part of a cultural public sphere, and they also support democracy when they have book clubs or literature circles. However, when we're talking about these democratic dialogues going on, there's also a lot of disagreement, because what should be the aim of all these discussions going on? And seen from a deliberative perspective, as seen from the perspective of Jürgen Habermas and other deliberative Democrats, the aim is to try to reach a kind of consensus. On the other hand, you can say that if you ask the political scientist from Belgium, Chantal Mouffe, who is a radical Democrat, she will say that, oh, we cannot always reach a kind of consensus, because in democracy there's also always a kind of fight between freedom and equality, and they do not always fit together. So what democracy is about, it is not always about trying to agree on something. It is about showing what is the conflicts. And furthermore, you can say who should speak with each other in these democratic dialogues. Should we make space for different kinds of groups, or should we all different kinds of cultures in a local community, should they talk together? So there can be a lot of different discussions and conflicts, as you can see here, about what should the aim of the dialogues be, who should talk together, and if there should be any rules, what should the rules be. And if you ask Habermas, he have a lot of ideas about what the rules should be. And if you ask Chantal Mouffe, she will say there should be as few rules as possible, and people can act in many different ways. And some people use their reason, and other people use their feelings, and everything is okay. And finally, democracy can also be about handing over some power to the local people. And here we're talking, I have shown you two examples from libraries a little outside Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark. And in the upper right corner, you can see a place. It is a former post office which have been handed over to the public library, and they have decided that they should create a different kinds of co-creation going on in this building, where it's up to the local citizens what should happen, and the library will make these things go on in co-creation with the local citizens. And the final example in the bottom is from another city where the library also owns this community house, and the library is funding this house, but it is up to a local group of people in this area to decide what should actually go on in this house. So they are, it is a kind of self-organization. So these are examples of democracy seen as you hand over some powers to the users. And at first glance, I think you can also say that, oh, this is really democratic, that you hand over some of the power to the local people in this area. But I will say that very often there can be a conflict here between the freedom that you give this group of people, and a kind of common good when it comes to the local community. Because do this little group of people, do they have an eye for other groups of people in the local community? And finally, I also think that when you're talking about democracy related to the lands, I think the very big question is who should decide in a democratic land institutions. Should it be the employees? Should it be the politicians? Or should it be the citizens? And I'm sure in US you will say it should not be the politicians right now, but maybe it should be a kind of mix of experts, politicians, and citizens, and that there should be a kind of checks and balances between experts, politicians, and citizens. And hereby I'm very close to an end. So when I was talking about democracy in general, the important thing was, I think, that democracy is a highly contested concept, not only when it comes to democracy in general, but also when it comes to the lands. And therefore, LAMs can support uh, um, democracy in very different ways. And what I have tried here is to pick out the four most important perspectives from my point of view. There can be many others. And these perspectives have been that we can talk about LAM supporting democracy by giving access to consent, that they educate people to a kind of democratic literacy, that the LAM institutions are arenas in the public sphere where there are space for public dialogues and community. And finally, the LAMs can also try to hand over some influence to the local citizens or users when it comes to content, to activities, and even also different kinds of operation. Okay, so that was all I have to say. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Casper. We have a couple of questions here in the chat. I encourage folks to raise their hand or type them in if they have others.
Yeah.
The first one is if Moof's concept of agonism and the necessity for it has been useful in helping LAMs to respond to public critiques of equity or diversity projects, regardless of whether they work or fail.
Mm-hmm. And what is the question? Can you say it again?
Yeah, it's there in the chat if you want to read it. It's whether Moof's concept of agonism and the necessity for it has been useful in helping LAMs to respond to public critiques of equity or diversity projects.
Mm. Yeah, what I have trying to be saying here is that you can look at that from many perspectives, and it is also basically a question about how do you understand basically democracy? Do you say that there's only one right way to understand democracy, or do you agree on that there can be many different takes on democracy? And I think that normally when we're talking about democracy and we're not thinking about it, people have a kind of idea about there's one right definition of democracy, but uh, uh, when it comes to reality, I think you can see that there are many different perspectives, and you can see it as a kind of a struggle between these different perspectives. Right now, there have been a lot of writing about a kind of intellectual freedom versus social justice in a US perspective. And you can also say that for some, neutrality on intellectual freedom, it is the point of departure for democracy if you see it from a traditional liberal perspective. But if you see it from a social justice perspective, it is another perspective. And there's overall a struggle between these positions. And basically, this, from my point of view, this is also a part of this democratic struggle.
Thank you. Another question here is in Denmark, where does the decision making regarding rights and access policies for lambs happen? Is that centralized in the Ministry of Culture, or does it happen at the community level?
It is local, and today it is rather market-based, I will say. I will say that in libraries 20 or 30 years ago, there was a lot of discussion about the collections and how should we have these collections. But today they are mainly driven by what people want. And it is up to people on a local level to decide that.
Great. I think we have time for one more question if anyone has anything.
I have one question. This is Tracy.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. This has been really enlightening. My question, though, is about, I think that in, decades past, we saw intellectual freedom and social justice, I believe, errantly being two trains headed in opposite directions or two trains on a collision course. But I believe that this last decade, especially when we think about what types of ideas, themes, authors, books have been censored, and even when we go back to the era of Joseph McCarthy, in terms of what types of materials he targeted, as part, of his leadership of the House on Un-American Activities, I think that we can begin to see that actually social justice and intellectual freedom are actually not only complementary, but they can't exist without the other. So, I just want to maybe push back a tiny bit. And I feel, this has been such an extraordinary lecture for sure. I've learned so much. But I want to just ask about those thoughts, because I guess I might be proposing that to think that social justice and intellectual freedom are, in their essence, essentially, canceling each other out. I think that's an antiquated notion. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think basically it is also when it comes to democracy, there's this how do you look the relation between freedom and equality? And basically, this discussion about intellectual freedom versus social justice, it is also a discussion about the same thing, I think. And I also think that it is possible to find a kind of middle ground. And I have also seen that there have been some writings about that. And furthermore, I will say that I think that if you see today, it is very few people that believe that it is possible to be absolutely neutral. I have only found one one document about that, and that was an British librarian way back from the 60s. So I also think that it is possible, and the tension is not so big as it is maybe as it is sometimes written in these papers.
Thank you so much.
Hmm?
Yeah, thank you, Casper. And thank you everyone for making it and sticking with us a couple minutes over. So yeah, once again, thank you very much, Casper, and take care, everybody.